I don't prefer taking administrative action. I expect the recommendations before the end of the summer, and I intend to adopt those recommendations without further delay. I'm going to continue to reach out to House Republicans in the hope that they deliver a more permanent solution with a comprehensive bill. Maybe it will be after the midterms, when they're less worried about politics.
Back in June, President Obama promised executive action on immigration by the end of the summer and accused Republicans of playing politics. But now the president's decision to punt until after the midterms is resulting in the same charge being leveled against the White House. And not just by Republicans, but by the president's usual allies.
It's clear that playing it safe is what is going on at the White House and among Democratic circles. And playing it safe means walking away from our values and our principles.
We're seeing that both parties are not really able to handle this issue. And right now, the message to Latino voters is that neither party has our back.
We should be getting it done now instead of after the election. When President Obama said to us, in particular the Hispanic caucus, I'm going to get something done and you'll know by August, it is a disappointment. It is a frustration.
Even as White House officials tried to explain the decision, arguing that any executive action before the midterms, followed by a loss at the ballot box, would set the cause back years. Not everyone was buying it. The fair immigration reform movement called it a, quote, breathtakingly harsh and short-sighted political miscalculation. In his Meet the Press interview, the president denied that raw politics were behind his decision.
Well, that's not the reason. I'm going to act because it's the right thing for the country. But it's going to be more sustainable and more effective if the public understands what the facts are on immigration, what we've done on unaccompanied children, and why it's necessary.
Those scenes of unaccompanied minors flooding the southern border took their toll on red state Democrats, who were hammered by their Republican opponents in TV ads for being soft on border security. But that crisis has now largely disappeared from the public debate. Today, the Department of Homeland Security announced the number of children crossing the border has dropped significantly, from more than 10,000 in June to just over 3,000 last month. Instead, immigration reform advocates and allies are drawing attention to the human cost of his inaction, namely the estimated 60 to 70,000 undocumented people likely to be deported between now and after the midterm elections. Joining me now is the midterm elections, rather. Joining me now is Democratic Representative from Illinois' 4th District and the chairman of the Immigration Task Force in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Congressman Luis Gutiérrez. Congressman, thanks so much for being on the show.
It's a pleasure to be.
Did the White House make a mistake in doing this? Your own hometown newspaper, the Chicago Sun-Times, saying Obama's immigration decision could hurt Dems in Illinois. I've spoken to a few other operatives who say, you know what, at this point, we're already so far tied with the Latino population within this country. It would have probably helped us, maybe in gubernatorial races like in Florida, possibly Wisconsin. Was this a mistake politically by the White House?
I think that, as I said, playing it safe, sometimes you win, but sometimes you can also lose, and there's a miscalculation, I think, in that you really repress the vote in the immigrant community. And in Illinois, those Latinos, Asian, young voters, people from Africa, people from Europe. There's a whole immigrant community here that's very diverse, that comes from all the different regions of the world. They were really waiting for the president. Now we have to really struggle with them, because what happens here is that people then decide, well, I'm not going to vote. And they say because the Democrats aren't with us, they don't have our back, they're acting spinelessly, and so we're not going to vote. The problem with that is that you have no greater champion than Senator Dick Durbin in the Senate for immigrants. And if we don't reelect them and you withdraw your vote and you don't participate, then what you are doing is simply weakening your position even further. We need to make sure that we have champions in Washington, D.C. when the president does make his decision, because he's going to make it in November. Look, we can't reverse that decision. We need to make sure there are champions there. I mean, what, we're not going to elect Governor Pat Quinn, who has made this state a haven of protection for our immigrant, a welcoming place for our immigrants. No, we need to reelect them, but it makes our job harder because
on
of this
that
decision.
point,
and
on
there
that
may be
point,
consequences that we not seen.
On that point, there's speculation that I've heard from some Latino Democratic operatives who say, you know what, the party could be taking Latinos for granted. George W. Bush got around 40% of the Latino vote back in 2004. Obviously, Mitt Romney got trounced this last election because a lot of Latinos were disenfranchised of his opinion upon immigration reform. But let's say down the line, maybe by 2016, the Republican Party comes to its senses and decides they're going to have some sort of immigration reform that they find palatable, that they find that they can digest. Is the Democratic Party at risk of a long-term alienation of the Latino vote because of actions such as this by the White House?
You know, one time, two times, you know, I'm really happy there isn't a 3 strikes and you're out rule when it comes to commitments of the Democratic Party to immigrants that they don't carry through, or we'd be out because time and time again. Now, having said that, right, I mean, there are 600,000 young immigrant youth that are out there with work permits that are not deportable because the president took action. We have saved countless others from deportation by working to change the rules and the prioritization in this administration. And let's face it, I mean, all of the Democrats in the Senate voted for comprehensive immigration reform when the package came through last summer. So there is a difference in the parties, right? So the problem here, it seems to me, is that we keep negotiating with conservative Democrats, which led us not to do anything when we were in the majority in 2006 and 2008 and had a majority in the Senate. We let conservative Democrats lead the way. And we can't let conservative Democrats and Republicans dictate the pace of justice that we're going to take for our immigrant community. And I think we make a mistake in doing that, and we confuse the public.
And it's a very important point you brought up, because in 2010, the DREAM Act in the Senate, they weren't able to get to closure because 5 red state Democrats would not agree to it. Congressman Luis Gutiérrez from Illinois, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks.
Joining me now is White House correspondent for the Associated